Good evening and welcome to everyone in this room and in all the rooms across the world watching online. I'm Molly Rosenberg, I'm Director of the Royal Society of Literature, and I'm so pleased that we're joined by so many of you tonight for this Literature Matters RSL 200 event with our partners here at the British Library and with the Living Knowledge Network. Those attending in person today will have all had a copy of the bumper bicentenary edition of our RSL Review magazine. Here you can read more about some of the work we've introduced for our RSL 200 5-year festival and some of the previous speakers we've had as part of this event series. If you'd like to learn more about the RSL and the work we do, please sign up to our newsletter. You'll be the first to hear about some very special events we have coming up, including the next in our RSL 200 events. But before that, tonight we have the pleasure of being in the company of RSL fellow Andrew O'Hagan and his great friend, the actor Gillian Anderson. You may all... I've just got to get to the end of my introduction and then you can... Right. In this extra special discussion, Gillian and Andrew will study some of their favourite literary characters and explore why literature matters so much to them. What makes Miss Havisham, who Gillian played in Great Expectations, distinct from Wallis Simpson, who she brought to life in Any Human Heart? How does it feel to give physical form to words on a page? Leading the discussion this evening is Andrew O'Hagan. Andrew was born in Glasgow and grew up in Ayrshire. He has 3 times been nominated for the Booker Prize, was voted one of Granta's Best of Young British Novelists in 2003, and has won the Glenfiddich Writer of the Year Award, the Los Angeles Times Book Award, and the E.M. Forster Prize from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. He is editor-at-large of the London Review of Books and is contributor to Esquire, the New York Review of Books, and the New Yorker. He is a Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, I'll say it again, and has served on its governing council. I'm very pleased to pass over to Andrew now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Molly. It's so wonderful to see all your faces tonight. It was Charles Dickens who said, "I have been in the theatrical profession all my life as a writer. My wife," he said, "is in the theatrical profession. My children are in it. My dog has been on stage since it was a puppy, and my pony, my chase pony, also goes on," he said. He took it for granted that the relationship between literature and acting was fundamental in our culture. So it's a joy to be under the auspices of the Royal Society of Literature, the most interesting, the most searching of our institutions representing literature, and to be able to talk to my mind, the most interesting actor of her generation, Gillian Anderson. Please give it up for her. She's here tonight. Now, I'm not going to waste any of our time on biography tonight. It would take me 15 minutes, at least, possibly half an hour, to go through even a summary of what Gillian has achieved as an actor. You all know her story. Born in Chicago, she's lived in London for a long time, and she has travelled the world representing this incredible panoply of characters over the course of her career. Women with strength, mystery, willpower, secret heart, and expansive motivation. I mean, I want to get right into with you, Gillian. I mean, right at the beginning of what we understand to be your career in the X-Files, you were there doing something which we hadn't quite seen before in my submission, which is to show a sidekick who wasn't a sidekick. That's to say, a female agent who didn't, as it were, show herself to be the hysterical or difficult one in that partnership, but in fact to be the rational, scientific one. David Duchovny's character was the more romantic, extraterrestrial believing, irrational character. And if you look back at the history of sci-fi television, we hadn't seen that before. Were you conscious right from the beginning that this was a female character that was quite new to television?
No.
You just found that?
No. I don't think I was conscious of anything at the time. I think that I was conscious that I was potentially going to have a job, and I wasn't even conscious that the job, were I to get the job, would tie me to something for, you know, a very long time.
But something obviously happened over those 10, 11 seasons where, in fact, from season 9, you're the central force in the drama. Your character, Agent Scully, becomes, if you like, the central consciousness in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it happened earlier on. It happened during the course of the series, and certainly I would say that the creator Chris Carter had, you know, that was part of his plan in a sense, his mastermind. But it was really. It was really the duo of them, I have to say, moving forward. The dynamic between the two of them had never really been seen before. You know, maybe the Thin Man films or something,
Sure.
but there was something very unique about that as well. But her trajectory was really, as much as anything, the trajectory of me growing up in front of the camera and being completely naive and just showing up in survival mode and trying to, you know, do what I was being asked to do on a daily basis. And anything that came above and beyond that, it was almost a gift from the writer in that he allowed the audience to project onto her.
Yeah.
One, we'd never seen anything like her before. Two, she was unique, you know, even in and of herself. But she was also something that could be projected upon by people.
Yes. And we see it right up to the present day with Jean Milburn, is that you never allow yourself as a performer, I suggest, to become any male fantasist's, you know, version of a woman. You find the strength somehow in the character. I mean, of course, I can't suggest to you that you've always been planning to play these roles, because that's not how it works in anybody's career, not for a writer or for a performer. But there's something in your DNA, I suggest, that attracts you to women who absolutely define themselves not against male definitions of who she should be, but find something in herself, a power or a direction that comes from the character herself. I mean, the comic engine in Jean Milburn is that it's almost a reversal of what you expect a parent to be like in that situation.
Yeah, and again, I'd have to say, you know, to be fair, that was very much, it is in the writing in Sex Ed, very much Laurie's writing in terms of where Jean sits in relation to the men in her life. I would say the thing that I brought to her was actually more neurosis than was even on the page, because it was important to me that, you know, Laurie not being a woman of a certain age, that we get to see a woman who is properly, you know, struggling and having to contend with all aspects of what being a woman in her 50s, a single mother, and negotiating herself as much as she is a relationship with her kids and trying to maintain, you know, an awakened sexual existence and also her career. And I think that's where we get to see both her weaknesses and her strengths are in contending with herself and both her failings and her, you know, successes in those relationships.
Did you feel that when sex education was offered to you, did you feel it was a risk for you? I mean, are you conscious that you've got a persona as an actor in the way that actors traditionally, strong actors do? We think we know who Clark Gable is. We think we know who, you know, Rita Hayworth is. In a sense, are you conscious yourself? Are you able to say that some of the roles you're accepting run counter to who? No,
I would say the only risk that I saw with Jean was for my two teenage boys. And whether having a mother who was playing a character like this was going to seriously damage them psychologically, but also, damage them at school. One, were it not to be successful, and then their mom would be on this creepy failing show on Netflix, or if it was successful, having to contend with that. And so I think that was really my only concern. I didn't get it at first. I didn't get. I have a tendency to appreciate much more subtle, ironic humor, and it was so broad that at first I thought, this isn't for me, and nobody's going to like this, and so I tossed it in the bin. But I'm very glad I was convinced to pull it out, and I mean, take a risk in a sense of, for all the things that I might have been afraid of, but also comedy. Even if one as an actor I have found, if it's not. It's very, very different acting comedy as it is drama, and it's actually.
I mean,
I find it harder, and it may just be me and not having had that much experience of it over my career, but I find that one has to be unbelievably specific. And very often, you can tell your body how to do. You can attempt to do something comedically, and very often, it can just not land. It can just not work. You can be trying everything, and yet it doesn't quite, or it's not. There's something that's not. And I know that having worked with.
Give us a clue. We'll work it out between us.
Johnny English, sorry. Rowan Atkinson.
I'm so glad you're
Having
here.
worked with Rowan Atkinson, I can say, I experience him, and I don't know whether he speaks about this, but I'll speak about it for him. But he is tortured by that specificity, and will do take after take after take, trying to, and I could very easily fall down that.
Well, he said it himself, that strange necessity for expression and restraint that exists in the comic actor, going all the way back. I mean, it's something I would suggest. I mean, you can do all the training you like, and there's a lot of technique there, but there must be something instinctive. You're quite funny in yourself, so you must be able to mine that. You seem to enjoy playing this part.
I do. I have a weird thing of being, like, way too serious that it's inappropriate and too goofy for my own good. Somebody called me on it recently. I was working with an actor that I'd never worked with before, and he said, you never know what you're going to get with you. I was dumbstruck. And then I thought, he's fucking right.
Yeah.
He is. And anyway, I digress, sorry.
That's the source of it. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is our overture. Let me tell you how this is going to work. We're going to look at 7 characters. This evening's all about character, specifically because literature, the Royal Society of Literature is our host this evening, is often about the creation, the maintenance, the investigation of character. So it seemed to us a great idea to bring in somebody who has the experience and the magnitude of talent that Gillian has. And we're going to look at 7. We've already mentioned some of them, but we're going to look at Scully from The X-Files, Lily Bart from A House of Mirth, Stella Gibson from The Fall, Margaret Thatcher from The Crown, Feel Free to Boo, Blanche Dubois from A Streetcar Named Desire, Jean Milburn, who we've mentioned, and if of time, Eleanor Roosevelt, who Gillian has just played in a forthcoming, April, I think, forthcoming TV series co-starring Viola Davis and Dakota Fanning. Now, we did start with...
Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh, yeah, Michelle Pfeiffer. We've mentioned the X-Files. The thing, before moving away from that, I just want to ask you about the construction of character in that, and how important, because I know you started to direct on the show, and did you feel that, I'm just interested for a minute in this relationship between performing and directing.
Yeah.
And did you feel that directing was a way of going further with the character, or was it to do with the whole picture?
No, I've wondered about this quite a lot, which is that for some reason, while I was working, and there are certain roles that I take on where I feel like I want to get involved in the process of expanding and making it expanding. For some reason with Scully, and I wasn't involved in that, and I think I was partly. It was so clear who she was. I was being reminded all the time who she was, and I didn't get involved in that. Whereas I think David very much got involved in his trajectory and wanted to do certain things or wanted to see the character go. And I kind of left that to the writers, possibly a bit too much. And so I didn't really have that experience on that show. And so that was really everything that transpired was all them. And it wasn't until later in my career that I realized that I might have a voice and I might be able to contribute and I might be listened to from time to time.
I mean, being listened to seems to me to be one of the driving engines. I mean, as a audience member, looking at the work. I mean, when you look at Lily Bart in A House of Mirth, I mean, an absolutely beautiful film. Still, it's dating so well. I watched it again this week, and you see, this is really it's really a look at the sexual mores of women in a world of corrupt men. That these men can make money for each other and help each other out and be an aid to each other in Wall Street. But when Lily does it, she also has to have sex with them. And if she doesn't, then, you know, I mean, it's incredibly forward-thinking and political, that film, it seems to me. There's a beautiful moment where she turns down the proposal of marriage from Mr. Rosdale. And as she turns away, you manage to do disgust on your face without a single word being said. I remember looking at that, just in terms of character, and thinking, how do you do that? How do you manage to give the inner life of a character outward expression? I mean, can you address that? I mean, even in relation to that part, tell us about the journey with that character.
Well, I do know that I have found that I cannot use real life, not direct real life stuff for internal lives of characters, and sadly and ironically, very often when I've been in the midst of playing a role, something in my life on the outside has mirrored it in one way or another simultaneously, which is really unfortunate. But it makes it then even harder to use it as a tool to get to a place or a choice. With Lily Bart, it's a very long time ago. I do know that I was terrified. I do know that this was the first, because it was the first time I had been a fan of Terence Davies. He was, he's quite an obscure director, and it was an art house film, and I happened to know his work and was slightly obsessed with his work, and so I was very excited to work with him and flattered to have been given the job. And I felt like I was proving I had an opportunity and a platform to prove that I could do something other than Scully.
Yeah. And,
at that point, The X-Files had become so big. And
is that a worry, Gillian, the idea that at whatever point in your career, or for any actor, especially women, I suggest to you, that they'll be pigeonholed and restricted in the roles that they're allowed to play, that a big successful TV actress is going to be stuck?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's less so now than it has been in the past, and it's also less so in the UK than it was in the US. I mean, I've spoken about this before, and it's also one of the reasons why I chose to move to the UK instead of staying in the States, was that for a very long time, actresses have been allowed to move between theatre, film and television effortlessly and not judged for doing TV and not punished for going back to do theatre. And so I wanted a bit of that in my career. And by being here, I've been able to have that. And since then, it's also become more acceptable in the States to do, to have careers similar to that for.
And in terms of characterization, could you just give us a minute on this question of the relationship in terms of formation of character between a performer and a director, because there you are with Terence Davies. I mean, not only art house, but a director of great stillness and concentration, who'll let the camera linger as he does in the House of Mirth on a stream for a good few minutes.
Well, there was in Long Day Closes. I remember being in college and seeing Long Day Closes in some art house movie theatre, and he had the camera was still on a carpet, with a light reflection coming in through the window and an image, and I don't know how long that camera remained on that carpet, but I wept.
It's still on there. Yeah.
I was weeping. He really does have the ability to express emotion, transition with, and I think there are a few directors that do this. Andrea Arnold does this really well, and it's quite rare.
Yeah.
To be
Lynn
able
Ramsey,
to
just
stay,
letting the camera sit.
letting the camera, but also knowing where to put it.
Yeah.
I've thought about that with Andrea's work. That under another director's hand, a camera for a long time on a windowsill would make you switch the channel. But for some reason, Andrea knows the sweet spot of where to put the camera that makes you riveted, and you understand what she's saying. You're understanding the transition that she's trying to invoke.
But that must be quite odd from the actor's point of view, given that you don't necessarily know.
No, and you can't trust it. And the amount of times that I've thought, this director I'm working with is genius. I mean, this is amazing, amazing, amazing.
And then it's shite.
And then it's shite.
Let's have a wee look at Stella Gibson and The Fall.
Yep.
I mean, that was, to many of us, I love the whooping. It's just great. Let's talk about the writing there first, because, I mean, again, we could do an hour on this alone, where it suddenly this character arrives on screen, on the small screen in this case, who seems fully formed. She seems to have a huge hinterland, unspoken, a huge background, a depth of experience, which you brought in. You just walked in with it, it seemed to us. Now, I'm not going to ask you how you do that, although I wish I knew.
I wish I knew.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most impossible thing to get to, but what I want to know is, at the script stage, did you look at that and say, I can find her?
I mean, to me, this is a constant example of the difference between good writing and not so good writing. And I don't even know how to describe it. You know, it's really hard to put into words. I do know that when I looked at the Fall scripts, that I'd read so many scripts up until that point, where it just, you know, you as a reader, let alone as an audience member, you're force-fed characters and motivation and emotion. And his scripts, Alan Kubert's script, is so spare, and yet I got everything about her. I remember being on page 6 and having thought before, you know, being told this was a series, I don't want to do any more series, I'm not going to do anything, you know, and then page 6, I was in. I could have, you know, and I can't tell you, and I'd since gone on to do something else, to kind of create something myself where or maybe it was before that, but the juxtaposition of what else can be out there and his script was such a huge chasm between the two, and yet I don't know how to put it into words. I don't know how to give notes to a writer who's not getting there or who doesn't understand it or whatever, to say, you know, I end up just saying...
It's as if you understood what an actor can do.
Yeah.
He left you the space to do it.
Yeah. Yes,
you know,
but also somehow it embodies, and I've only been able to speak about it in terms of it being alchemic, that it almost felt like she was on the page in as few words as it you know, took to have her on the page, but it was almost like but also he really works on his, you know, he'll spend a year or two, you know, manifesting in his head who this, and I think it's the same with an artist. I think it's the same with a Clemente or with a Bryce Marden, where they work on a single painting for a year, and it's when they're done, it's one colour.
Yeah.
It is one colour, and yet, or with Rothko,
Yeah.
you stand in front of it and
Again
you go,
and again, yeah.
oh my God, that's amazing. And yet it's what is, and
It's
it was the same with his writing.
It's undeclared depths that are just embedded,
Yeah,
they're just there.
yes.
There's a wonderful moment, just to home in one thing in the fall, there's a wonderful moment where Stella does something without any explanation, without any indication. It's an expression of her inner psychology and desire. She takes an attractive young man back to her hotel room, fucks him, and then doesn't use his phone number. Men have been doing that on film for years, but women weren't allowed to do that.
Yeah.
You know, she
I mean,
has
the amount of times in all of the press that I did for the whole 3 seasons, within the first 3 questions from a journalist, it was about that.
because they couldn't handle it.
In 2019,
Yeah.
or whatever it would have been in season
Yeah.
3, it was remarkable.
Well, yeah.
And I found that as fascinating as anything else they wanted to talk about.
People couldn't get over it.
They couldn't get over it.
You know, that this intelligent, sexy woman takes a man, has a brilliant moment of sex, and it says, right, that's you, fuck
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really good. As far as, you know, talk about, that's how liberation works, ladies and gentlemen. We're racing on because we've got a lot to get through.
Yeah.
Blanche Dubois. Now, one of the things that I think I must ask you is that when it comes to character is the question of tradition. Because some roles, it's not true of Stella, it's not true of a brand newly minted character that you've made before our eyes. But what about a character who's been minted long ago and who has been played famously, as Blanche was, of course, on screen and on stage many times? What's your relationship with that? Do you ignore it in your formation of the character, or do you draw it in? I mean, this has happened to you a few times, famously, more recently, in All About Eve. I remember talking to you at the time, and you said, I'm not taking any interest in Betty Davis's performance, famous performance, as Margot Channing. You had to find it yourself. Can you just talk us through that?
Well, I mean, exactly right. And part of it is fear of some part of my brain mimicking something.
Yeah.
Or not starting from a clean slate and somehow taking on things that I don't necessarily agree with once I have then done my own work on it. And I think, you know, having worked with Benedict Andrews, who was the director of Streetcar, you know, I found working with him so rewarding and such an amazing experience for this, particularly for this play, which I'd been wanting to do for no less than 30 years. And, you know, when we got into the rehearsal space, we really, really started from scratch. And we started from scratch, and we dug such a deep hole in getting into all the different layers of Williams's text.
Can I just interrupt and ask you
Yeah.
why you wanted for 30 years to play that particular character?
I don't know. See, I did a monologue from it for an audition, but I didn't remember that until I'd spoken in an interview about the fact that I'd always wanted to play Blanche Dubois, and my mum sent me an email and said, because you did an interview for such and such for this thing when you were a teenager, and I'd completely forgotten. And it's almost like, it might be a little bit along the lines of a string theory, which is that it's already happened in a way, something that is incredibly profound in your life. And so to what degree are we moving towards that end because it already exists?
Yeah.
And I know I might sound a little bit mad at the minute, but and to what degree are we manifesting out of thin air?
Yeah.
Because it did feel, I can't tell you why. I couldn't tell.
Because it's already
but
there.
there was identification.
The language is there. She's there as a
But I
character.
already identified
you're
as a 16-year-old young lady.
Yeah.
I already identified with Blanche, and I knew that she lived inside me. But why?
Well, I could see it at the time, and it seemed, if you don't mind the suggestion, at some level, not in a crudely autobiographical way necessarily, but at some level intensely personal. You and I made a short film based on, it was a prequel to the play actually, which you directed.
After we did the play.
After the play.
Yeah.
And that piece that film, beautiful, I think, showed a heavy investment on your part in this sort of the deep history of the character, in the brokenness, going way back, going, as it were, before the events in the play. You were interested in the mess, the brokenness. And it seemed to me, as I watched you direct it, and play it, of course, that there was something in it about her vulnerability which just was a touchstone for you, somehow.
Yes. Is that what it is? But also the degree to her, you know, she's barreling forward, you know, full speed ahead at self-destruction.
Yes.
At a brick wall. At the same time that there's also part of her that knows that she's heading in that direction and she wants to be saved.
Yeah.
You know, she's not necessarily able or willing to save herself and to do what it takes to pull herself, you know, off of that train. But she knows that there's a chance that somebody else, you know. It
was pretty mesmerising, that, because, I mean, what she had was, in her suffering, she had incredible strength and spirit. You know, desperate for survival, leaning into survival, but somehow falling short.
Yeah, that tension is fascinating, and somehow that tension exists inside me, and I feel like it almost still does, you know, exist inside me, even though I feel like more than Blanche, I win at the end of the day. You know, so far I keep winning and jumping off the train. But there is something definitely about that.
Could you introduce us to that space, though, Gillian? It's the hardest thing to talk about in a way, but there's Tennessee William.
Yeah.
He's written a classic. It's an accepted classic. We know the words. We all quote them. It seems set in concrete. And then you come in and say, no, it's not set in concrete. It's liquid. I'm going to insert myself. These are the lines. This is the situation. The director and the company and I are going to go somewhere with this. Can you just describe
I think that's the director,
creation?
though. I think that's the director. I think before, you know, that's another thing that happens in starting from a clean slate, at least in my experience, is what that allows you is, if you're with a good director, which Benedict was, that you can be led to those places.
Yeah. And
I had no idea where we were headed. I had no idea how she was going to end up sitting in that world, how it was going to sit in relation to this revolving stage that we were on, or any of it. And he, you know, slowly, you know, pulled at all of us and guided us at the same time towards who we became as these characters. And I couldn't have, you know, it could have been different under a different director's hand. I don't know. I don't know if that was the Blanche that was always inside me, and that's how she would have, I would have manifested her, no matter who the director was. I don't know.
As a side issue, during that process you described of being led by a director towards that clarity, have you ever thought in the middle of that journey, this isn't working, this director's wrong?
Certainly not with Blanche.
No, I mean in other parts, throughout your career.
I've certainly thought, she doesn't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
I thought that meant, I thought,
and how does the character creation
what
survive?
am I doing here? Why did I say yes? Oh my God. I thought
you start ringing people. Oh my God. But is that something that you have to learn to cope with as an actor?
Yeah.
You have an idea of a character, you're on this track now. You've never walked off of a production, as far as I understand, have you?
No, it's not necessarily so much that. It's about, because I'm happy to be led. And very often I show up. I mean, I just did a film in Pittsburgh, and, you know, I mean, sometimes I know exactly, I mean, with historical characters, obviously you know what you want yourself to be like as them, as the final, you know. But and you have to trust yourself, like with Thatcher, You have to trust yourself that at the point that you've got all the bits on and the hair and the clothes and the everything, and that, you know, that it's all going to come together, that the walk and the movements and the voice and the everything, that it's going to, you know, but and then there's the version which I just did, which is where I don't get quite so specific. I mean, that had to be so specific, Thatcher. And always something I just did where kind of a loony character, not particularly well drawn out in the script, went knowing what she was going to look like because I'd done a lot of fittings, no clue who she was, but had to trust and chose to trust, other than some things that I'd made up in my head, that I was going to wait until actually I was kind of there on set with them to see how she turned up.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes that happens, and you know, fortunately, I think it went all right in the end.
Oh, totally. I mean, one of the things we're obsessed with, obviously, the RSL, is text, writing, how much of it is embedded in the art of literature.
Oh,
but
well,
obviously,
I'll talk about that. I mean, sorry, I'll ask you a question.
well, that, I mean, it's just really a prompt. I know that you care about this because perhaps of all the actors that I know, and certainly among your generation, you're actually properly engaged with the question of literary character. You played Lady Deadlock, we talked about Lily Bart. You've got a relationship with text and with, as it were, arriving at a character out of a famous text. Can you just give us a little...
I mean, I know with Lily Bart that you know, I really studied the novel. And same for Bleak House, because there's only so much that a screenplay can hold, and particularly with something that is not multi-series but a single film like House of Mirth, you know, there's going to be so many things that that the film is not going to be able to encompass that are in the book, and on the one hand, you have to be able to immerse yourself in the novel, but let go enough that you don't then ring the director every 5 minutes and say, why isn't this bit in it? And why isn't that bit? And I think my character would do this. And, you know, and same with The Crown. You know, working on The Crown is very much, it's not a biopic about the prime ministers. You know, it is about the Queen and about the Crown, and everything is through that lens. And so you can do all this research and work, you know, your buns off, but the parameters of what you're working within are only those six episodes, are only those slices of her life, you know. And so even though you may have immersed yourself entirely in, you know, her dealings with unions, or with the IRA, or with whatever it might have been, you don't get to go there. You know, you don't really
No, but
get
you seem to like to absorb the history or the kind of societal pressure.
I feel, I mean, for me, I feel like if I didn't do that, even though it's not touched on within the text of the screenplay, that it would be, I would feel like, one, I'm doing the character a disservice, the human being a disservice, but also that the character would feel thin. Even in just doing the research and filling in all that stuff, is the Rothko.
That was it, that was the layers.
Yeah.
I remember this specifically. I mean, it wasn't a huge part, but it was a very important part in the adaptation of War and Peace. Or Madame Scherer, you know, the Salonese team, there she was at the top of the show. It's not like you wanted to study the Napoleonic War, but you needed, I remember us having a conversation on the phone, where you needed to understand what the historical pressure in that room was. And you just found it didn't come into the script. It wasn't something she said, it was something she was at some level. Just another layer. But let's get to Thatcher, because it's one of our famous 7 characters. And of course, we've been talking about text a lot, as seems right, but with Thatcher, what we must discuss is the physicality of the acting. That suddenly you were doing something with your mouth, doing something with your head, leaning into people in a different way. I'd never seen anything like that from you before. Of course, there's the look-alike aspect, and there's the big hair and all the rest of it. But more importantly, you did something to your physical being in that part. You dropped your voice. Can you just tell us how you found all that? Because it wasn't obvious that you would. It must have been tough.
Yeah, it wasn't obvious that I would, and I think that is one of the things that is the scariest thing, and it's similar with Eleanor Roosevelt, which is but before, again, I mean, I guess that's the same with all of them, whether they are historical characters, literary characters, or brand new contemporary characters, which is that in order to say yes to something, I have to know that it already exists inside me. There's no point in going searching for it, because and so given that when I asked myself that question, could I be, do I think I could play Thatcher? For whatever reason, I thought that I could. And so then it's about knowing that we're not going to use prosthetics, knowing that that there's a lot of differences between her and I. What are aside from the givens, which are that you're going to have the helmet, and you're going to have a bodysuit to make my girth a little bit bigger, and the shoes, and knowing that I'm going to study her mannerisms and her walk, and et cetera, knowing that I'm going to study the voice to the best of my ability and find a place where it exists somewhere between her voice and my voice, so it doesn't sound too over the top or too unreal or whatever. Then there is how to sit inside of her, so that when I'm inside, because it's one thing to look afterwards and go, oh yeah, you look like her, or that's her profile, or whatever, but to actually feel like her from the inside, that you are embodying that.
Well, that's the mountain to climb, I suggest to you, because in a way, the way I'd put it to you is, how do you be her morally? Because, that's the challenge, right? Hugely divisive figure. You've got to play it as a human being. That's not. This isn't a question about do you agree with her politics or not.
No, it's not.
This is somewhere else where it's how do you take on the moral being of a character who some people think is despicable morally, and other people think was great.
It's the same that you have to, when Forrest Whitaker played Idi Amin, he actually got to a place where he absolutely thought that that Idi was doing the right thing, that he believed that Idi Amin was
worrying.
I know, it is worrying. And I don't think you necessarily need to go that distance, but you do need to get to a place where you understand why they are making the choices that they're making. You understand it based on what you now know of their childhood, of their upbringing, of their relationship with their partner, of their, growing up in Grantham and having a father who was an alderman, and all the bits that made up who she was, being, Methodist, and hugely impactful on the decisions that she made as a politician, and how the family worked, inserting yourself and understanding what makes somebody tick is the first step towards understanding how they then get to make those choices, so that you can play that scene, making those choices within the scene, and it feels genuine. It feels like you are embodying.
Well, it was lovely to watch you and Olivia Colman in those scenes, because there's two extremely powerful individuals, both of them regal in different ways, and there's a kind of struggle going on as to who is the more powerful, who is the more correct. Of course, you can see in the performance, as I think, I mean, it's a judgment, I guess, you and Pete and the whole crew had to make about how are we going to make her look? Because in some of those scenes, she's working against her own best interest. You can see that she's fucking it up. She's not popular with the Queen in those scenes, and therefore the audience too might be like.
Well, she didn't care. She
didn't care.
She knew she was right.
Yeah. That's what she would have said. Yeah. Okay. And did you ever at any point think, oh Christ, I'm playing somebody who in everyday life I might have objected to, or does that not come into it?
Doesn't come into it.
Can't do?
No.
Because that would be a bar to playing.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I'm very keen to play a murderer.
Yeah.
I've never been really given. No, I don't believe I've ever murdered anybody.
The night is young.
What are you doing later?
Yeah, absolutely. Always ready for killing.
You know, you have to give yourself hope. You have to.
So Eleanor Roosevelt, I mean, did that present a different
That's something entirely different, because you can say all that, but I just, you know, one doesn't have to fall in love with her. I completely fell in love with Eleanor. I didn't realize, I knew she was an extraordinary woman, but I had no idea she was as extraordinary a woman as she was. And so it was just, I mean, just the delight in doing that research. And
I mean, we're getting a bit of an acting masterclass from you, and I'm moved to ask you, were there things about Roosevelt that gave you a clue how to do her, how to find this extraordinary woman, other than the lines that are there in the script, obviously?
Yeah. You know, again, it's about, to me, it's about the research. It's about going back to childhood. It's about understanding, you know, the thing about Eleanor that, you know, her self-esteem was unbelievably low for the majority of, I mean, for her entire life. You know, she was raised essentially by her grandmother. She lost her mother and then her father when she was 8 and 10. She was sent off to a very mean grandmother, raised and then sent away to go to school. And actually sent to the UK to go to school that was run by a French woman who essentially kind of saved her life and taught her the kind of woman that she could be, you know, and she became that woman. But sorry, I'm so in love with her.
Is it hard sometimes to leave a character behind?
No, it's more, you know, she just had tragedy after tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And her mother used to tell her from a very young age that she was ugly. And the reason why she was going to send her somewhere to be well educated is because she was never going to be able to use her looks. And so she had to use her mind. And she called her granny. Her mum called her, you know, those kinds of things inform a character. And you know, when you watch Eleanor later in life, even when she would give speeches in front of the United Nations, which she helped to, you know, to found, in a sense, she's tentative. Her voice is tentative. She's not. She's always referring to notes. Her voice is very high pitched and it's broken, and she pauses a lot and she says and she, you know, all those things that you think that strong, powerful women have a certain degree of perfection to that when they deliver and they give speech, you know, she's a perfect example of how you can be afraid and do it anyway, but you can show that you're full of fear and you can do it anyway, and you can lead the United Nations, and you
go beyond the fear,
and you can go beyond the fear, but not even beyond the fear to give the most amazing speech, you know, known to man. Just beyond the fear to be able to even stand up there and open your mouth and say what you need to say. And there's actually a really wonderful line that I think was a direct quote from her, which of course I'm not going to remember. Which is that, oh, I'm not going to remember it. But it's something to do with...
Answers on a postcard, please.
Because she's giving advice to her lover, Hick, who's coming to her for advice because she has to give a speech. And she basically says, you have to get up and do it and say it, because what you have to say is more important than the fear. And so if you've got something to say that is more important than the fear, then no matter what is going on for you inside in terms of terror and stage fright, and you know that you've got a high-pitched voice and weak and that, you know, but because she believed, I believe, that because she believed that what she had to say was so important, and it was what she had to say. First of all, she was a brilliant writer, and she wrote most of what she said in public.
Yes.
Is she was transforming lives. The amount of work that she did that transformed people's lives, you know, people from, you know, rough families, low-income families, you know, being the voice of the New Deal, of Franklin's New Deal, going out onto the streets and actually
Hugely enlightened person.
Oh my gosh, you know, and because I think she knew that what she was doing was showing the American people that they were protected, that they were heard, that there was a way out of the mess that the country was in, and that even though she said and and had this high-pitched voice, and she knew that she was judged for her looks and her voice, she knew that what she was doing was so important that she needed to do it anyway.
Boy, could we do with her now.
Oh my God.
I want to ask you before we go to the audience,
With both of them,
plenty of time
even
for questions, both online and here in person with you lovely people. But just let me, while you prepare and while the mics are starting to roam, I wanted to ask you, the great Toni Morrison once said that this, as an artist, as a writer, with each characterization, with each book, there's a little less of you left as an artist. It kind of rubs away your essential nature. And I wonder if, given this great panoply already of characters you've played, we've discussed 7 of them. What's left? Is there anything left in the tank? And if there is, what is the character? Who is the character that you'd love to play?
I mean, you know, I haven't, you know, I'm constantly playing women who have their shit together. Or if they don't, they do enough of the time that they're holding, you know, there's a roof over their head, and, you know, and I'm really, I'm really interested in playing someone who is struggling quite a lot more than, you know, who is really having a hard time either making ends meet or is, you know, I played a few alcoholics, but, and, you know, properly an addict, or, you know, I hate to use this word, but this, I do mean this, degenerate.
So if I understand you correctly, what you want to do is play a serial killer who's really got her shit together. Can't wait. Right, let's go for some questions. Stick your hand up. We've got some at the front right away, second row. Where are the mics?
Oh, you could probably just yell it at this point.
I think so, but it's fairer, I think, to the people who are watching online here. Can you come down? If you've got a mic in your hand, start asking your question. Save time. Down here. We'll get to you.
Hello, Gillian. Are you able to address the rumours about you playing Sarah Paulson's wife, potentially?
I was literally, after some of the posts about, you know, throwing my name in the hat on my behalf, right? I emailed one of my agents in the States, and she said, she's a 30-something, 6-foot-tall professional football player. Like, she's like, you know, one of the best football players in the world, and has about 30 pounds of muscle on me. So no, I would say probably not.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I think we've got one right
Stick
down here
up.
in the front.
Yeah, plenty down here.
Sorry, thank you. If you could be one of your characters for a day, if you could live as any one of them, who would it be and why? And I love you, and I think you're amazing.
Probably Stella Gibson. I mean, I don't say Jean, but I kind of feel like I live Jean's life. More and more so, the more embarrassing I get in the eyes of my sons. But it would probably be quite fun to play Stella for a day, just because she's so smart, and has such, I really like the way her brain works in the show, and also I wish that I could be a detective, actually. I'd love to, but I'm too stupid and too clumsy and don't take enough stuff in. I feel like I'm present, but on the other hand, I miss like 3/4 of what is right in front of my eyes. And also nobody would buy, if I knocked on people's doors or I like showed up at a crime scene, people would be like, isn't that Gillian Anderson? So it would be really nice to actually get to do it like for real, because I'm Stella Gibson.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you still have a question? Okay.
Hi.
Sorry, I know you're meant to be in control.
in
I
my
won't.
English-
I'm not going to take control.
In my English class, we've been studying Great Expectations. So we watched a couple of versions of the book. And I thought that your version was really interesting. I was just wondering, what do you think Miss Havisham is a symbol for in the novel?
Oh, golly. Gosh.
A nation's exam passes depend on you. No pressure.
I mean, she's trapped. She's the embodiment of a woman who is trapped in an old-fashioned ideal of what a woman's role is meant to be, and that was in part why I chose to use a particular voice that I did too, because I felt like she was almost frozen in time as the 18-year-old that she would have been when she was at the altar. Am I right?
Yeah.
I don't, yeah?
I think so. And
Yeah,
a kind
I've
of
never
studying
actually-
disappointment,
yeah.
you know, and how you can live a whole life, as it were, impacted by disappointment and what it does to you,
Yeah,
how it shapes her cruelty
yeah,
in a way.
yeah.
I mean, that was so evident in the way you played her, because she wasn't just some mad person. She was a suffering person, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And just eaten away with resentment and sorrow and self-pity, and none of those things attractive characteristics, but at the same time, kind of understandable and timeless, and particularly given the era that we're talking about, you know.
So just cut and paste all that, you'll get an A. Yes, right there. And then we'll go further back.
Hi, what's up?
What's up?
I just wanted to know, how was it to work with Lily Rabe?
Oh, how it was to work. I mean, it was so great.
Sorry, can we have that question again? Because I know some people wouldn't have heard that.
How was it to work with Lily Rabe, who plays Eleanor Roosevelt's lover, I will say, Hick. She was great. I mean, I've seen some of the episodes now, and the scenes but between the two of them, at least in the early episodes, I've seen are really special. And I don't know what, I mean, I know what we were aiming for, and it seems like we might have achieved what we were aiming for, but I don't know why we're shocked, because they are, that there's a different quality that Hick brings out in Eleanor, and almost a girlishness and a softness and a giddiness, and yet Lily is she's so still, and she's so she's a curious, she's very, very unique. She's a wonderful woman. I really enjoyed working with her. She was a delight, and but I feel like it was because it was her. It was because of how she listened, how her Hick listened to Eleanor, that it allowed this other aspect of Eleanor to come out. Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's take a couple of questions from online.
We've got a huge response online from audience members all around the world.
Okay.
I'm just going to read out two for the purposes of
Oh, wow,
efficiency.
okay.
So Courtney joined via the Living Knowledge Network, and Courtney asks, when working with a new writer or producer, what's the most valuable information they can provide you with to help you get into character, and what do you prefer to figure out for yourself?
Wow.
And then there's another question.
Wait, one at a time. Is that all right if I do one at a time? Okay, so the experience that I had on The Crown, which was they set a precedent that I wish could be manifested all the time. But the care with which the actors or anybody, the crew, all of the crew working on that series is such that you feel, everybody feels like they're valued and they're part of the whole. And also their research team is so exquisite and forensic. You could literally ask them for anything. I mean, I asked for some things, for them to find some things that were down such rabbit holes of, you know, detailed video, blah, blah, blah. And so when you've had that support, then not having that support, either because the producer doesn't know how to do that, it's not part of how a show is run, it's not, doesn't cross their minds, they don't have the funds, they don't, whatever. It really reminds you then how much of your career has been incredibly lonely, and you've been on your own, because most of the time you are kind of finding all that yourself and needing to. But the luxury of having producers that know and really care for the actor's process is invaluable and incredibly rare. With writers, it's. I don't want to get into I'm sorry. It's really hard to find really well written scripts, and it is, and so I have started to realize that I compartmentalize and I have a tendency to not necessarily care more and give more if I feel like the script is giving back. Because
But that would be natural, wouldn't it?
It would, but it feels very petty and.
Well, you've got to struggle though. If
the
script isn't there, well, you've got to be a bit difficult. Come on.
But it is hard when you know that it's like. But then it's down to me. It's like, well, what am I doing? Why have I said yes?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a big. So I'll leave that there.
And another question, and it came from Damien Barr, who's also a fellow of the RSL. Hello, Damien. And this one's for Gillian and Andrew. You can read one book again for the first time.
Oh.
Really relive a formative reading moment. Which book is it, and which version of you is reading it?
Oh, God.
That's a cracking question. We love Damien Barr, by the way. Hello, Damien. Do you want to go first?
No.
I'll pick an obvious example because I think it's important to pick something that you read perhaps in childhood. Damien's question is very good, and for me it is To Kill a Mockingbird, because I suddenly realised that not only was that the father that I wish I'd had, but also that was the enlightenment I wish we had every day. Was the understanding that a living work of literature, and by the way, the Royal Society of Literature is the great organisation for keeping these questions alive and adding to them and refining them and leaning into genuine change. And for me, that book, I could see that every time that book occurred to me all the way through my life, it would be a prism through which I could achieve a better understanding of who I was and where I was, what planet I was on, and what the morality was of that place, and what the complications were.
There's more complications today, just in how it's been reframed.
That's right. And we live with great writing every day in that way. So I would love to be reading that for the first time tomorrow and starting all over again.
Gosh. I'm really struggling. Mostly because some of my favorite books are so dark, and I'm not sure I really want to be in that place at this particular moment again. Although I do, I mean, for instance, A Little Life. I'm not sure. I mean, I could not believe how good and profoundly devastating and richly drawn those characters were, and I really, but I'm not sure whether I want to put myself in that world at this particular moment. I'm trying to think of books that I've read when I was a lot younger. I didn't really discover reading, I think, until I was an adult. Not in a way that I wished that I had. So, but in the interest of time, I think I'll leave it at that answer. Just to, yeah.
We've still got some time for more questions, so please fire your hands up. I feel there's always this sense that we should be fair to the geography of the room, so let's go to the middle. Yes.
Hi. If you could give one piece of advice to young performers, what would it be? Sort of like, what would you maybe have said to your younger self?
Well, I think I have a responsibility to change. I mean, I was asked at one point to write a letter to my younger self of advice, a letter that was then published, and but it doesn't really relate to performance. And I guess in relation to performance is quite different, because it's, so what I have learned, and this is both for my, in the olden days of auditioning, and it still relates to performances as a professional actor, is that if you put everything you have into something, whether it's an audition or whether it's in a play or whatever you're cast with, or whatever it is that you're doing, whether the performance is dance or whether you're a painter or whatever, if you know that at that particular time, in that moment, with the information that you have and the time that you have, and that if you put everything you know you have into it, then that can actually feel like that's enough, that you know that you've given, you can't let yourself off the hook. You can't say, oh, well, I didn't get it because. There's two parts of this. There's the way that we can sometimes sabotage things by not really putting effort into it, because that means if we don't get it, then we can just say to ourselves, oh, well, I didn't really try. It's actually doing the opposite, knowing that you did the absolute best that you could do, and the fact that you didn't get it does not mean that the best that you could do is not good enough. It means that it purely was not meant for you. It was meant for somebody else. So then being able to then let go of what the consequence is, which is incredibly freeing, to be able to honestly say, look, I showed up my 100 or 110%. And same with Thatcher. I put everything into that. I felt like I did the best that I could do. At the end of the day, I'm sure there are people out there who absolutely hated my portrayal of her, but the majority could have hated and gone, what the fuck was she doing? I mean, what with the head and the that could have been the majority. That could have been all the articles. That could have been, and I needed to be in a place where I felt like this is what I've got. This is what I've got. Take it or leave it, and really being able to, cut to, if that had been the case, I might not be sitting here. I might have quit the business. But the idea is that actually you have to get to a place where you can let go after auditions. Yeah. Just trusting that, And the amount of times that after the effect, when I haven't gotten something that I was particularly attached to, when I realised that actually I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful I didn't get that because ... another door has opened, or my mum needs me, or whatever.
Thank you.
Yes, you've got it.
Hi, so I was wondering whether your character interpretation of Blanche had been led by Tennessee Williams's sort of kind of ahead of its time style within it, yet it was pulled down by the societal aspects of the time.
I think definitely, yes. I mean, I think that my interpretation, and I think probably led by Benedict, but certainly I came to this realization and understanding, was that the version of the moth to the flame of Blanche had as much strength and fire in her than as it had vulnerability and I use the word weakness, but I mean weakness just in terms of her being under the control of the alcohol, being under the control of her relationship to men, being under the control of her own demons, and so I. And
you mean
also,
in a sense that her fragility shouldn't be allowed to write her off? That she was somehow, because she was fragile and vulnerable, that didn't mean she was a write-off or a mad person. There was always that way of describing Blanche in early reviews, and even Williams, has to be said sometimes, allowed you to feel she was just a kind of crazy person.
Yeah. A crazy person, and also that all of the life events and all of the attributes that he writes equate to a woman who is on the outside so delicate and weak that she looks like she might blow over or break, or, you know, I feel like there was enough in his description of the fire in her belly, you know, that lended itself to, you know, I mean, imagine living the life that she lived before she showed up on her sister's doorstep, to keep coming back, you know, to keep showing up after being kicked out of a town, after, you know, selling yourself, after being beaten up by you know, this liquid gold.
And to walk into a whole lot of male brutality and be blamed for it.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much going on in that play, which you drew out. I mean, that's a question really I would like to ask. Do you ever want to go back again to a character? I mean, it has been known performers go back to...
There was a potential opportunity for us to do it a third time, and I at that point, I started that route, and then I realised that actually I feel like I escaped with my life.
Don't go there again.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just trusting to you. There's so many hands up. Just let's get the mic to whoever occurs to you. Yeah. Yeah, let's get the questions moving. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Terrific event, really, really great. Wonderful, thank you. I wanted to ask, Gillian, whether you had read White Houses by Amy Bloom when you were preparing for the Eleanor Roosevelt series.
No.
No, that's a pity. You should.
Yeah,
it's about. It's based around the relationship of Eleanor and Hick, and is really a wonderful read. So it's a pity, but.
Oh. Thank you.
Sorry.
He's still reading. Yeah, who's got the mic?
I've got it.
Yeah, go for it.
I wondered, I started to ask you a question on the Galaxy Zoom, and then the time cut out.
Oh,
and
no.
I wondered if you could finish it
no.
now.
Okay.
It's about Macbeth. You've often said you wanted to play Lady Macbeth, and I wondered, who would you choose? Which dashing Scotsman, or, you know, would you choose to be your, apart from Andrew,
but available.
would you choose to be your to be Macbeth? Can you think of a character?
Well, you know, I'm going to answer this in a very disappointing way, which is that I've since decided against it. Yeah.
Why? Too many portrayals in existence?
No, I think after you've done, you know, such full-bodied, constant, immersed characters as a Blanche and a Thatcher and et cetera, I almost feel like I've, like Lady Macbeth is, I know it's terrible, but it feels too easy. You know, it's, in the same way that I almost feel like Hedda Gabler is.
You mean too obvious?
Too obvious. Yes. And
Yeah.
I did a Lady Macbeth as an audition when I was in my late 20s, I think, and it was that got me interested. But it was the same time that in the work that I put into it, and I don't know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I would find it satisfying enough, and I might be proved wrong. You know,
I think it's an interesting piece of self-knowledge that, if I could venture, because I mean, Frances McDormand, I think, did a brilliant job recently on screen, but I think that it's a piece of self-knowledge to know that something's just slightly too predictable for you. So in a sense, it's like something being overwritten. There isn't enough room for you because people have already imagined you in roles like that, or seen you in roles like that, perhaps.
Yeah, and it also feels like I've explored so much of it. It doesn't feel like it's something that I haven't explored yet.
Yeah.
Which is part of why I say yes to things.
Sure. Well, you make good choices on that basis. You go with your gut, which must tell you, no, that's not going to be as exciting as it seems on paper.
I kind of got to that when I was at the point of, am I going to give away months of my life to this?
Yeah.
I kind of made the decision not to. And I might come back to it, but yeah.
Who's got it? Yep.
Gillian, thank you so much for a lovely evening. I'm curious about one particular aspect as a Canadian now living over here. I'm keen to question you about your accent this evening. What feels natural to you now that you're living over here, and when do you have to put it on? When do you turn it up, turn the dial up? When do you turn it back down? How do you approach an audience, coming into an audience like this? What feels right?
Usually it's about what's in my ear simultaneously, because that's how it I just got back from the States, and while I was in the States, the other half of my accent was part of how I was communicating. And it is, if I was 5 minutes on a phone with somebody from the States right now after doing this interview, I would fall into an American accent. And it's something that at various times I've tried to control it. I've thought, this is freaking people out too much. I need to, and when I've tried to control it, it just sounds, I feel like I sound like an idiot. I'm trying not to speak with a British accent. I'm trying to speak with an American accent. I'm trying, and it feels very, it feels false. And what feels most natural to me, having grown up in both places, well, predominantly in my formative years, having grown up in the UK, this feels the most natural when I'm here, and American feels the most natural when I'm there. And it's kind of as simple as that.
Okay.
Hi. Can I ask you a question? Because I have a microphone, I have priority. Sorry.
I can't see where you are.
I'm here. So artificial intelligence.
Sorry, where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Hi, sorry.
So artificial intelligence is entering all kinds of arts, and there are computer games. There is augmented cinema that Cameron is doing. So what do you think? What is the future of cinema? There will be no actors at all. It will be all computer generated or not? And you personally, would you buy AI-generated art?
Let's take the last question.
The first question.
Yeah, I think we just take the last question.
The last question.
Would you buy AI-generated art?
AI-generated art, so not NFTs, actually AI-generated art. Why are you laughing? I've never thought about that. I didn't know that AI is generated art. I mean, if I liked it and I could afford it, maybe. I mean, I don't know.
Was there another part of that question that you wanted to address? The earlier bit? No.
No.
Got it. Okay, let's go.
I just read Whitebird with my son because he had to read it for class, and
Whitebird.
Whitebird,
yeah.
yeah.
That film.
Yeah. And I thought it was beautiful, and I just wanted to know, they haven't really said too much about the movie adaptation that you've done. Can you tell us anything about the filming or the character or anything like that, or how you prepared for it?
Directed by Mark Forrester. and I shot it in Prague at the beginning of this year. And it also has Helen Mirren, who is the grandmother. It started as a what do you call that? What do you say?
Graphic novel.
Exactly. It started as a graphic novel, and it's the story of a young boy in German-occupied France during World War II. The young man has polio, and he's on crutches, and he lives with his parents still, and he's in school. I think he's 14. He starts out as 14, and I play his mother, and he ends up helping a fellow classmate, a young girl, to hide when the Germans come to take the Jews away from his classroom. And so he helps to hide her, and he hides her in the barn outside their house, and for over 2 years. And they develop a very strong, beautiful friendship and relationship, and probably shouldn't tell you the end, but anyway, it was directed by Mark Forrester. I've seen it. It's really beautiful. The kids in it, the young girl and the boy, they are riveting, and I know they're trying to take it to festivals first before it comes out. So it's very sweet.
Time for 2 more questions. Where are the mics? Yep, go for it. Just get them into the hands of people with their hands up, please.
Hi, Gillian, at the back.
Hi.
How are you? I'm just wondering if you've ever returned to the Merchant Hotel in Belfast, which you helped make famous, and if you keep in touch with Jamie Dornan.
Where is the Merchant Hotel in Belfast?
It's where they filmed.
What?
That you did a lot of filming there with the.
Oh, did we?
I
thought we filmed at the Marriott or the Hilton or something, because that's where the pool was that Stella...
Okay.
Maybe. I don't remember. No. Every once in a while, Jamie and I communicate or have a meal together. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much.
That really worked, that chemistry, and it's one of the mysteries of, contemporary British television, just how, on paper that must have sounded mad. A very bright investigator has a strange relationship with a killer, but it doesn't seem...
Oh, but that's not unusual, though. That having become, since then, a crime aficionado, and that's actually really not...
Their minds are in sympathy somehow.
Yeah, that in order to truly understand the serial killer, for instance, the investigator goes as far as, goes properly into their mind and their thinking, and sometimes even kind of loses the plot.
Brilliant. Okay, one last question over here.
Hi, Gillian. I'm here. Hi. So I might have misunderstood you earlier, but I thought I heard you say that when you choose to accept a role, you feel that it's either in you or it's not. And I guess you come across as really kind of cool, calm, and collected. And hearing you talk about Eleanor Roosevelt and how she's kind of, afraid to, or not afraid, but, there's kind of that fear there. I was wondering if you kind of related to that at any stage in your career, where you kind of like going back to what you're saying about string theory, not string theory, but, about whether it's in you or not. Did you ever feel kind of that way, maybe earlier on or even in the present?
I still very often feel that way. And I think so feeling that level of fear that it could potentially unsettle or unseat me and performance, etc. And that's still very alive and well in my life. And I think why I was interested in that with Eleanor is that the way that as you said, you seem calm and collected. So that's an outside persona that I know that I can put on a certain percentage of the time, even though underneath I might, or even, physically, my hand might be doing, whether I'm doing like a Letters Live thing at Royal Albert Hall or something like that, where I'm in front of a large crowd and I'm in a lot of fear. What I was fascinated about with Eleanor is the fact that she showed it. She allowed herself, it's not even that she allowed herself, I think she knew that that's how she came across. And she knew that what she had to say was so much more important than the fact that but also what she did is, she had an audience back then. There was something about her personality and her magnetism and the way that she, or maybe it was the time, because I've watched a lot of interviews, but I think actually that part of it is a little bit of elitism, and that because she was a Roosevelt, and certainly because she was then married to a president, people didn't interrupt her. Men didn't interrupt her. So you see these interviews where a journalist who is 90% male at that time is asking her questions, and she's taking her time to answer. And there are a lot of spaces between her words and he's not interrupting. They're not interrupting. And it's kind of shocking. It's like, wait, that doesn't happen anymore. She's not being, but I think it was because they wouldn't dare in society. I don't think they would have dared to interrupt Eleanor Roosevelt, even though she's taking a really long time to explain this or to talk about this particular thing. And so, I don't know what exactly my point is. I think that I answered your question.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Ladies and
Thank
gentlemen,
it's come to
broadening the field and indeed the meaning of literature is a core value of the Royal Society of Literature. It's a unique organisation. Give your beautiful minds a friend for life by joining the organisation. Gillian and I agreed to do this event tonight because we admire it as an organisation. We lean into the work that it's doing, and we're so grateful to you for coming along tonight, for your enthusiasm, for your help and your fact-checking, and for your general enthusiasm. It's been a real thrill for me personally, and I want you to put your hands together and thank my friend, Gillian Anderson.
I'm gonna ask you to sit back down for one second. So I can say thank you so much, Andrew and Gillian. Please join us in the foyer after the event, where Andrew will be signing books. And for those of you attending online, you can also buy books through the RSL's bookshop.org shop, supporting independent bookshops. It's impossible to say book and shop that many times. We're very grateful to Gillian and Andrew too for giving those here another special treat tonight with a few signed official RSL tote bags. We have 10 signed Literature Matters tote bags available to buy from the RSL outside now. All proceeds will go to supporting the charitable work that we do that Andrew's spoken so beautifully about. I can see a few people itching to get out of their seats now. So before I let you go, I would just like to give a few final thanks for this evening. Thank you to our partners, the British Library, for hosting with us tonight, particularly John Fawcett and B. Rowlett. Thanks too to the team at Unique Media who have produced the live stream this evening, particularly Rebecca Godley and John Stetheridge. And a particularly big thank you to the RSL's events manager, Beth Gallimore, as this is her last event for the RSL before taking up a new, excellent and exciting role at the Bradford Literature Festival. So thank you, Beth. To everyone joining us in this room and from your rooms at home, We're looking forward to seeing you again very soon and hope you've enjoyed this evening as much as I have. Please join me in giving a final round of applause to our speakers this evening, Gillian Anderson and Andrea Hogan.